This is Sybert signing into Red Alert 3 on the map Fire Island, and wow, it has been a while since I've actually said that. On the left side, in the bottom corner, we do indeed have the Red Empire player from YZZD. It's VVX. And in the top right corner, going for that single racks as the Blue Allies from YZZD, it's PK. YZZD, a clan in China, which means both of these guys are Chinese, and this was played on the Chinese server, which is always a good bit of fun to see. Now, right out of the gate, we do have the triple dojo, going to be securing that kind of right side oil derrick, which of course is always good if you're Empire on the non-fixed version of the map. But it's been a while since I have done this. I haven't actually casted a replay in over a month. I think the last replay that I casted was at the end of the Clan Wars live stream. I casted GBH Michael versus God of War, because that was a Clan Wars game that I did miss. And I think that was the last time I casted a replay, so I think that was about a month and a half ago. It just has not been a great time for casting replays. I think I moved shortly before Clan Wars, or maybe it was shortly after. Anyways, I moved apartments to another apartment in the same location. By the way, we've got the airfield there from PK. I've been doing a lot of work that is not necessarily Command & Conquer related. A lot of it has been real life stuff. University is going quite well. I'm in my last 6 months there, so come September, I'm going to be graduating with my bachelor's degree, which means I've got lots of real-life things going to be coming up rather soon. And we do have the MCV moving out for a potential turret push. Also could just be for a more benign third base, as that would be maybe a little bit more common. But a lot of times you'll see Allied players drop their MCV a bit closer over here so that they can try to get that third and fourth relatively quickly. But in this case, it's more going to be favoring that third location, more going to be favoring a further range on his MCV with the turrets. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of things that aren't gaming related. I've been doing some stuff that is gaming related that just isn't Command & Conquer. And so yeah, just been a busy time in general. I have tried to upload some stuff. Obviously, I have not uploaded a lot, which is why tonight I got out of university, and I was like, hey, I'm going to cast myself at least one Red Alert 3 game, at least one Kane's Wrath game, and, you know, just kind of recap a little bit. Now, it's triple refinery from our Empire player, but our triple refinery from Allies is coming up as well. There's the potential fourth refinery coming out from our Allied player. And we haven't had a huge commitment of anything too crazy from these two guys. It's teched up to Tier 2 for our Empire player. For our Empire player. Allied player, on the other hand, hasn't quite gotten out those cryocopters just yet. No Tier 2 for him. Relatively passive opening from both of these guys. I don't actually know that we missed all that much through my rambling. We are missing the fact, or rather we are seeing the fact that there's a missing fourth refinery while this MCV is on the move, so that's kind of interesting, just in the fact that you kind of see players tend to take fourth refineries much more quickly on Fire Island than on a lot of other maps, just because of how much easier it is to secure. But of course, taking that fourth refinery does open you up to plenty of harass potential, particularly when we're talking about riptides or cryocopters. Terror drones can be a factor on this map as well, but lots of players just drop down the naval yard anyway, so it doesn't even really matter in that respect. At any rate, Striker VX is out on the map. We haven't seen the huge Tengu cloud, which is sometimes very helpful in breaking an Empire or an Allied player, but at the same time, PK hasn't committed super hard to cryocopters, so we don't necessarily need to see that Tengu cloud, which is a lot more important when we're talking about double airfield, 6 or 7 Apollos and cryocopters. Once we're starting to get into that mid to late game scenario where Allies just has a lot of things that are hard to kill, there's Tier 2, by the way, coming out from our Allied player, significantly behind that of our Empire player. But at any rate, once you start getting into that mid to late game, it really does help to have those Tengus just in ridiculously high numbers, because with the point defense drones, you're going to need them to break the Allied Air Force, or you're just going to get locked down by any decent Allied player's cryocopter control, which is kind of the other side of the coin. But we do have one Tengu going to be going down. The big transform does happen, and one focus fire of an IFV does get it eliminated, and then even a Tengu up in the air going to be taking some shots off at those MiGs. Now, YZZD PK, unfortunately, doesn't have a super ton of ground forces to respond to this. He does have some Peacekeepers, but of course, Peacekeepers notoriously bad at actually dealing with Tengus. So I'm not exactly sure that that would be the best idea for him to try to counter that. I do like how YZZD PK has kind of kept those Peacekeepers out there on the front line, just kind of acting as a bit of a meat shield, a bit of a buffer for him. And of course, anytime you're harassing an allied ore collector, really, if you lose more than like one unit, it's basically monetarily not really worth it. Of course, shutting down a refinery for X number of seconds is going to be more worth it. But oh, VVX is throwing away his entire army, and I'm not exactly sure that it's actually going to be worth it. We'll have to take a quick look at what he's actually got. Now, he's remaxed on Tsunami tanks, which is good, but I don't know that he actually traded very cost-effectively at all. He did clear out some of the Apollos, but Apollos are not necessarily the only thing that PK has in this game. Of course, the Vindicators will be able to potentially run rampant, and if there's any cryocopters, which unfortunately we haven't really seen from PK, then the Tengus probably wouldn't be in good enough numbers to actually deal with them. Finally, we are going to be seeing one of the cryocopters as he moves in here. The Tsunami tanks are getting on top of the Guardian tanks, which is of course good for the Tsunami tanks as they're able to eliminate all of them pretty effectively, and the ground forces for our Empire player cannot be stopped by our limited allied forces for now. Now the Tengu's starting to roll up here. They are going to be targeting down one of the cryocopters. The Apollo's finally here to kind of protect those cryocopters. I'm not actually sure where that like super crazy heroic Javelin Trooper squad got off to, because there was 3 or 4 Javelin Troopers cleaning up the Tengus in the north. Not sure what happened to them. At the same time, this Tengu may actually just need to be told to attack that cryocopter, as the Harvester does survive the refinery, got eliminated. However, Allied player has been a little bit ahead on that eco for a little while. And maybe this has more of been a reset for both players. I'm not actually sure if PK had to have more Peacekeepers or more Javelin Troopers than that. I'm not actually sure what ended up happening to them. Vindicator comes in, kills off one Harvester, which is quite nice for PK. VVX just now going to be restarting that Harvester. And PK will, of course, be able to sell off that command hub once he gets it finished constructing. Still sitting on Tier 2 for our allied player. He has not decided to go up to that Tier 3. And, of course, Athena cannons can be a good way to shift the game into your favor. But we're also seeing an Empire player who's not producing anything out of their Mecha Bay or out of their MCB, which is always a little bit troubling when someone is not producing anything at all. All right, so he's restarted production on his Mecha Bay. I thought maybe he was going to be going for a 4th refinery, which can be difficult to secure versus any sort of player going for a serious amount of cryocopters. And even against just the cryocopter or the cryo support powers, it can be difficult to secure. YZZDPK is going to be scouting these Tsunami tanks in the north. One of them, fully heroic, will be able to do a good amount of damage as soon as they get on top of this Prospector. But the cryocopters are most likely going to be rallied to deal with this, as well as the Vindicator, as it comes in here and will be dropping the bombs on the Tsunami tank on at least one of them. However, oh! The heroic Tsunami tank gets stuck in, and his buddy gets completely pushed away here as he was blocked in there by his buddy. And unfortunately for VVX, he lost a fully heroic Tsunami tank to just that collector, of course, and that is the risk that you take whenever you're going up against allies. But Tengu's going to be running away. They may have been able to fight, but no. There's the transform, which will be saving a couple of those Striker VXs, and this one single Imperial Warrior, he's trying to be a hero down there by himself. I'm not sure what that cryocopter is doing way far in the south. It looks like it may be going for a bit of Harvester harass, which is always annoying to deal with no matter what faction you are. Just those multi-pronged harasses and attacks always going to be difficult to deal with. But PK has done a reasonable job of defending. He did take some damage, but again, he has been a bit ahead on that eco for the majority of this game. Just now, is our Empire friend going to be evening things up? And, ooh, Tengu's actually going to be flying by the Apollos. One Tengu will go down, which is a nice pickup for YZDD PK. Also going to be losing a power plant, and this is the kind of moves that I love to see, although it's not necessarily always the best idea to use a tsunami tank to do it. A lot of times, if you end up getting a Yari mini-sub or two and then just utilizing them to take out the power plants out on the water, that can always be a effective thing to do. And just something that's really annoying to have to rebuild into the mid and late game is those power plants. So cheers to VVX for doing that. But YZZDPK starting to build up to that kind of mid to late game composition where we're starting to see more infantry get mixed in because they've got pretty reasonable DPS. But the mech army is going to be the more commanding portion of this allied player. And again, cryocopters, or cryo-shot going to be coming in, firing off. And Vindicators should be coming in to drop the bombs. Although, the Apollos, oh, yeah. Oh, never has an Apollo been so effective as to actually kill off the refinery of an Empire player. And I can see VVX just not going to be too happy with how that went. Loses a Harvester as well, so he's down to just 2 refinery economy in this game. Of course, the oil derricks were eliminated a long time ago in this game, so yeah, PK may be only on 3 refinery economy, but that is much better than the 2 refinery of his opponent. And soon PK is going to be going back up to that 4 refineries, which is quite good. And actually VVX, you know, kind of identifying that he's got this extra Harvester, might as well use it out on the water. PK throws away, it looks like, potentially an Apollo and a Vindicator, which is not too great, but anytime you're attacking into an allied player, you know that he may have a multi-gunner turret or 2 queued up, and he may have already placed 1 down, which means 1 more may be in the queue, and you always have to keep that in your mind as a factor, which of course makes any attack a little bit more daunting, and you're just thinking like, oh man, if he's going to plop down a multi-gunner turret, then I'm going to try to focus it down, and then suddenly all of his units are going to be focusing me down. And once you're looking at infantry-based compositions with vehicles mixed in, now you're thinking about, okay, how exactly am I going to micro this to try to crush all of the infantry but not utilize too many of my tanks so that I'm still firing at his tanks, and PK just has an absolutely huge army in comparison to our Empire forces, but potentially with some incredible micro and some probably just big mistakes from PK, we could see VVX make a big push and tear through the army of his opponent. Now, it looks like PK may be moving out with his MCV. Could be very well for this kind of 5th refinery, which is, of course, not very common to see players actually take the 5th refinery. But in this case, it may end up happening. Now, it looks like he was just going to be repositioning his MCV a little bit. Could be taking the 5th refinery up here, which might be a little bit harder to scout. And, ooh, another Tengu will crash through some walls. So VVX not being super cost-effective in dealing with his opponent's economy. He wants to, of course, do that extra bit of damage, but he's trading off maybe a few too many Tengus. And that's kind of the problem of late-game Empire harass, is if you're trying to use Tengus, you're probably not going to be all that effective at it. You're probably not going to be getting the cost-effective trades. And so you have to try to do some sort of multi-pronged attack, because Apollos will wreck you, Vindicators will wreck you, and Cryocopters, once they have them in the mid to late game, can just shut down your attack all too easily. So you have to kind of think, all right, am I going to move in with Tsunami tanks on one side and hit with Tengus on the other, and now I have to worry about losing too many Tsunami tanks, and am I doing enough damage? So anytime you're playing up against a defensive player, of course, I mean, that's the same as it is in any RTS, but particularly if you're trying to do Tengu harass, just because as the game goes on, it tends to be less effective. It tends to not have as big of a payoff as it does in the kind of earlier game. But Apollo's going to be coming in here, engaging with the Tengus. Now, of course, PK, if he's slapping that F key, then he will be able to... Oh, VVX trades a VX and a Tengu, and actually could have gotten that last Apollo as well. A little bit of a miscontrol there by VVX, is going to be donating away a unit or 2, a bit unnecessarily. And PK is going to be going for a bit of an expansion up in the north there. Still hasn't actually gotten his tier 3, interestingly enough. He has just dropped down that 5th refinery, so he should have enough income to justify that tier 3, as lots of players do get tier 3 on even 3 refineries, although a lot of the times they do have 4 refineries by the time they're up to tier 3. At the same time, our Empire player has not been able to do a lot of the critical damage of slowing down the Allied player that you would like to be able to do in the early and mid-game. But King Oni is out, and of course with that you have to wonder, is this King Oni actually going to do anything, or is he just going to be like the #1 target for cryocopters to shrink down? Because then my King Oni is like no longer anywhere near as effective. And in a lot of cases that is what happens. Now potentially we could see a couple of Striker VXs try to find a weak spot over here, but of course they're going to potentially need some Tengu support and then find a good angle of engagement on that refinery. But I don't actually know if that refinery has been scouted. We did see a Tengu come around this location a little bit earlier, but he would have just seen the command post. He wouldn't have necessarily seen that refinery at that point, and he should have been able to put 2 and 2 together. The one Tengu that was also the weakest was unfortunately not the one that could transform away to safety. And actually a Riptide going to be heading out. There is going to be a Defender VX turret getting established here. And the Riptide may be able to get some nice damage off on this Harvester, although the Harvester is going to be getting pulled over to the Defender VX side of that tower. And little annoying things like this are just absolutely great for PK. I would like to see him move out with his army as he sees that he pulls basically the entire army of his opponent. His opponent basically like QA moved his army right over there. As you can see, King Oni's not actually very good at dealing with stuff that's out on the water. Tank Buster's also not very good at dealing with stuff on the water. So instead of sending just the Wave Force artillery, he pulled his entire army out of position, and that could have actually led into a pretty interesting cryo-get-in sort of situation where as he's getting filtered back through these buildings, he just gets absolutely wrecked by a cryo-get-in. Ended up not quite happening, but some opportunities that our allied player could have taken, and this army is actually just getting out of hand for our allied player as he has gone up to that maximum clearance. He has purchased a couple of those Athena cannons, which of course can drop down their Aegis shield. But anytime you move out in this choke point, you have to be thinking to yourself, if you're an Empire player playing late game versus allies, is his cryo-get-in on cooldown? Like, you have to ask yourself that question. And you just know if you move a little bit too far on the chokiness of this map, if you just move a little bit too far forward, you are going to be getting wrecked by a cryo-get-in, and that is exactly what we're going to be seeing happen. And this is one of the reasons why many players hate playing against allies, because it can kind of feel a bit impossible in the mid to late game once we start seeing these big cryo-based plays. And that's exactly what this game comes down to, is at this point, the allied player is so far ahead. Bull Rush was actually one of the more effective bull rushes I have ever seen in a game, just because most Empire players just don't go tier 3. They don't get a lot of King Onis, and when they do try to utilize that ability, most of the time it's just getting locked down by Shrink Rays. Whoa, my word! Oh my word! Oh my word! Those crushes are incredible. The Emperor's Rage is actually doing something. That Allied army just got wrecked. Wow. Those crushes were insane. PK let everything get so stacked up, but he does still have 5 refineries. And he has, of course, on that tier 3, he can go up to those Mirage tanks as well. But our Empire player has certainly showed us the fighting spirit needed and the crushes needed to come out ahead in that engagement. And that was just way more effective than it really should have been, considering how the start of that engagement worked out. Just with the cryo-get-in firing off, but then PK couldn't actually get down to clean everything up, and the Bull Rush actually cut down a surprising number of his Guardian tanks, and then a couple of Tsunami tanks worked their way through the lines and crushed all the infantry, and now suddenly 3 grand worth of infantry were just eliminated by like 2 Tsunami tanks. Or maybe might have even been more than that, because there was quite a few Javelin troopers in there. And of course, Wave Force artillery. They do have that range decrease when they get shrunk. Well, all units have the range decrease, but You can use that to kind of force them into range. If they're already given an attack command, they will move to the closer range, and that will put them inside of your artillery range, and then you can just totally wreck them, which is what we just saw PK do. PK, once again, going to be going out on the harass. The Wave Force Artillery last time did not allow him to actually do any real damage to that, wow, this expansion timing, to that expansion, but PK with the, like, perfect scout timing there, as you can see. As soon as he moves down there, he's like, oh, you're expanding right this moment. Well, fortunately, I have Apollos to deal with that. Couple of Riptides have gone down trying to eliminate that refinery. Won't quite be able to do it, but Cryocopters could very easily harass that location. I don't know if he would actually use a Cryogeddon on it, but we do have like 3 or 4 Cryocopters here, and with the stacking, they will get eliminated rather quickly by those VXs. There's going to be the Bull Rush coming out from our King Onis, going to be actually taking down that refinery really quite quickly, and ordinarily when you see those sort of moves, a lot of times the multi-gunner turret buys enough time for the allied player to get there and defend. In this case, our Empire player has actually shut down a harassment from our allied player and taken out one of the refineries of his opponent, meaning that in this point of the game, the eco has finally actually shifted into the favor of our Empire player, which it was basically never in the Empire player's favor from an earlier point in this game. It just has never quite gotten there. Allies has always been ahead in eco in this particular game, or pretty much always ahead. I don't know, maybe some of the harassment ended up working out a little bit better, but for the most part, it's been like 3 refinery versus 3 refinery, or 4 refinery versus 3 refinery. Or like we saw for a while, 5 refinery from our allied player versus 3 refinery of our Empire player. But PK, the one thing that he's doing is he's playing very defensively, and he's not really making a big power plays against the Empire player. He's mostly letting the Empire player come to him, and the time that he did move out, that he did make those aggressive plays in a big way, was when the Empire player tried to move out, when VVX tried to move out, and just got Cryogeddoned right at the front of his base. That was really the only big army movement that we've seen PK make, other than just little harassments with a few air units or with a couple of Riptides. Everything else has just been, you know, play defensive, go eco, tech up, get my units, get my army, and that's just particularly how PK is playing. And part of the reason is that it does work well with allied late game on this map. You've got Cryogeddon, you've got chokes, and that can, in some cases, lead to some very favorable engagements. Not necessarily every single time, but various times it does lead to that. 5 Cryocopters is a ridiculous amount, though. Pretty much no matter which way you slice that, that is quite a few Cryocopters. Cryogeddon does fire off. The King Owners need to activate their Bull Rush. They need to get out of there. They will actually be able to escape, which is great for them, but they're heading directly into a concave. There is a lot of units here, but they are crashing through. There's still 3 of them here, and on top of that, the VXs are here for support. Our Empire player is actually trashing through a lot of these allied forces. He could be doing better with the focus fire. He could be doing better with the utilization of his units, and unfortunately, he will end up falling there. Oh, man. VXs attacking infantry when they could have been helping to clear up either infrastructure with the buildings, or they could have been going for the Mirage tanks to help allow the King Onis to do their own thing. And I think those King Onis, at least one of them potentially could have been controlled to go for crushes on the infantry rather than just sitting there. And of course, once the shrink happens, then it's all over for our Empire player, because the Allied Air Force showed up. It wrecked all of the VXs in the sky, and VVX just was not able to hold on after that. But again, PK is not making the big army moves out. He is not looking for those big takeover engagements to end the game. He's sitting back, macroing up just that little bit, and letting the Empire player come to him, which in this case is not very advantageous because he just lost a Harvester. But if he's able to pick up a couple of more units, then that is always good for him. Again, it's just single Riptide hit squads have been working out okay for our allied player. They haven't been necessarily working fantastic, but they have been doing their part, and they are relatively effective in this particular match. tank busters are getting cleaned up, and tank buster surprise is one of those things which can work very, very well, but generally it just does not. Ever since they added the delay to tank buster surprise, which probably happened in the beta, I don't quite remember, but tank buster surprise just used to give you 5 tank busters instantly, and I'm pretty sure there was like no delay on them spawning in and when they could fire. So it was quite good. I do remember days of going in and just getting a bit of vision in the back of your opponent's base, 5 tank busters in, snipe their power plants, and then suddenly you have a much easier job of breaking the front of their base, or, you know, whatever like that. Sometimes you even get lucky, snipe a tech structure. And the fact that you can shoot through those mountains like that is just hilarious. As the refinery does go down once more, and that refinery will, I mean, maybe it will finally get reestablished, but it's always going to be under the threat. Ever since the point where artillery enters the game on Fire Island, this kind of third refinery location is always going to be a threat. It's always a threat of, like, quick counterattacks from your opponent, regardless of race, because it's quite easy just to get a couple of units in, snipe it, and then back on out. But particularly when we're talking about, you know, artillery, which can quite easily take out those refineries. That's something that players always have to keep in mind, and VVX responding a little bit slowly, will be losing most likely 2 or 3 of those units. No, he will lose 5, 3 force artilleries, although if he's able to capitalize on a couple of these units, which unfortunately for VVX he will not be able to, but he just lost some pretty hefty units. He lost a refinery as well, and PK may finally have the advantage he needs to steamroll over his opponent. I feel like at this point he could just about A-move, just about QA move, and take this game. There's been a couple of different points in this game where he has been able to pretty much do that. Maybe some minor control, just shrinking down particular units with cryocopters, and then other than that, it's like basically QA move for the win would actually be relatively effective here. Would be pretty effective. 5th refinery back up and running, although technically I guess it is going to be the 4th refinery, but when we're talking about a 3 refinery Empire player, it's always good to be up 1 refinery on your opponent. That always feels quite nice, knowing that you did that bit of damage, that you've got that bit of eco advantage over your opponent. And potentially the refinery being rebuilt by our allied friend here. Did sell off the command hub as well, going for a bit of a scout. Interestingly enough, we'll be dropping bombs on some King Onis. I mean, hey, you've got a heroic Vindicator, you might as well use it. It's kind of earned its stripes. It has certainly paid for itself over time. And there's the 4th refinery going to be reestablished, and potentially a 5th refinery eventually. That's actually kind of surprising. Wait. Depleted. We're at that point in the game where stuff is actually getting depleted as a pretty high-tech hit squad moves over here. Nice use of the Emperor's Rage. Is going to be able to take down potentially one of these cryocopters. Of course, since they are shrunk down, they do less damage, but unfortunately, the cryocopters will pretty much all be able to escape, and the King Oni will be able to escape quite nicely from that Peacekeeper. Although if he wasn't shrunk down, he could, of course, just stomp all over that Peacekeeper. And the cryocopter is going to be moving out, and hey, it's a hit for a hit. You killed my refinery. Well, I'm going to come in and take out it. He could have potentially gone for, if he would have gone straight up for that refinery right at the beginning, he potentially could have gotten it. But he goes for the safe option, cleans up just the harvester, and will escape on out of there. His heroic Vindicator earning even more value. And one thing that we could end up seeing from PK is either Tanya or a spy. That would not be a bad idea, either one of those things. Yuriko is also a good option for an Empire player in the late game. Of course, versus cryocopters, you always have to be careful because they can freeze down Yuriko really quite easily.
Sir, they're attacking us.
So Yuriko tends to be a bit more gimmicky, just because you've always got that threat. And Vindicators can deal with her as well if she's standing still and the Vindicators are in high enough numbers. But cryocopters can freeze Yuriko down really quite easily, which means you have to make sure that you defend her. I thought I just saw something flash up there. I don't actually know what that was. Potentially just me seeing things. I'm not actually sure. Was that a precision bomber? Did that just happen over there? Are we at the point where he actually has enough points? Where PK actually has enough points to have gotten that precision bomber? I'm not actually sure. At any rate, this game is, it's still going on. A little bit of harassment from each of our players. Going to be just a Vindicator making their bombing run, and also a Wave Force Artillery going to be cleaning up that refinery, forcing the sell-off. PK really doesn't want to move out. Not at all. Vindicator comes in, goes for another bombing run. We'll be able to escape because he's heroic. Empire player pulling back. Empire player pushing forward. Cryogeddon should be firing off relatively soon here. That should be the end of the game because Cryogeddon will end up hitting probably a lot of this Empire army. And then allies will have a super cost-effective engagement. It's Fire Island, so this is basically Destiny at this point. At any rate, I think this is what it's actually going to be coming down to, as we do have Striker VXs on the front lines. Not necessarily something you want to see. Normally you want maybe a couple of Tsunami tanks up front, maybe a couple of King Onis to deal that first bit of damage while your Cryocopters, or while your anti-air is just behind them to help deal with the Cryocopters. Ooh, PK, be careful, man, with your moving in. Although if he's heading straight down this corridor, oh, is he going to force an engagement in the corridor and then use the Cryogeddon? This could be what it comes down to. His Cryocopter's going to be focused, freezing these King Onis. And, oh, I don't know if Emperor's Rage is if this is necessarily the best place to use it because of this reason. Cryogeddon firing off. The units are even more slowly moving. One King Oni makes a legendary run through these units, does crush a lot of things. There's going to be the honorable, no, what is that even called? Final Squadron tears through a couple of those units, kills off at least a Wave Force Artillery, and, well, that King Oni, he tried to do something, bless his heart. He tried to do something, but the Allied force is a bit too powerful here for YZZDPK. He will move on over. I swear I just saw another something or other flash up here. I don't know what that was. That was quite bizarre. Maybe I'm just straight up seeing things, but that will do it. VVX being defeated, and that game actually had some pretty big vehicle-based fights, which is not something you always see. I know some players don't necessarily like seeing heavy infantry-based play, but in this particular game, lots of vehicles coming out from both players. 34 minutes overall, a bit of a longer game, bit of a passive game, not necessarily the crazy aggro that we have seen out of Chinese players in the past, but yeah, I just wanted to cast a game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's actually getting kind of late. I hope my neighbors don't mind that I'm casting this late, but at any rate, thank you all very much for watching. And should be more videos coming in the near future. This is Sybert, signing out.